intend to do research on one particular project or something. So what kind of a research we need to do? So that will be the research design. What is this exploratory research? So you try to explore the various causes for business research. Through this subject, we will be able to understand the concept of business research, and we also know what is business research. Primary data has to be collected on our own, whereas secondary data has already been collected. Hello my dear students, I am Purnima, faculty in the Department of Commerce and Management, Vidhyaashram First Grade College, Temple of Excellence, MYSURU. In this session, we will be having a discussion on business research methods, which is one of the subject for the syllabus of 5th SEM B.Ba. So let us see what the syllabus holds for us. Now in this, we have 5 units for this 5th SEM B.Ba. In this, the first unit comprises of the nature and scope of business research. So, what do we mean by business research? Or first, we'll have to understand what is the meaning of research. So, research is nothing but you try to find out new things, or when you are faced with a problem, you try to come up with a solution to the problem. So, we always hear around us that some latest technology is coming into the market. Now, why do we have the latest gadgets in the market? What is the main reason behind having so many facilities around us? What is the main reason for increasing our comfort level? So it is all because of research. So research, there is endless amount of research which is being going on so that we can find some comfort for all our problems which are surrounding us. So we can see, for example, in almost all the banks, so there was lot of rush just to deposit the money and withdraw the money. So because of research, we have this concept of the ATM. So where we can always go and withdraw the money which we have deposited at the bank. Then we also have this machine called as the cash deposit machine. So with the help of this machine, you can just deposit the money into your bank account. Then after that, again, in the ATMs also, we could see that lot of long queues were standing out. So again, with the help of the internet, we could just reduce this amount of queues in the ATM with the help of this digital transfer of money. So how is it possible for all of us to come up with such innovative ideas? It is only because of research. So research helps us to find solutions to our problems, and also it helps us to see that we can live a comfortable life, and it will also be an answer to any of our problems as such. Now, in this first unit, we will be studying about what is the meaning of research. Now, what is the meaning of business research? Why do we have to have a business research? What is the nature of the business research? And what is the scope of business research? So all this we will be seeing in the first unit, that is nature and scope of business research. Now the second unit is research design. Now, what do we mean by research design? So, there are various types of research design. So, when we just get into the research, or when we intend to do research on one particular project or something, so what kind of a research we need to do? So, that will be the research design. So, we have to see what kind of a research we have to do. Then, third one is measurement and scaling. Now, what do we mean by measurement and scaling? So, usually when we are collecting the primary data, or when we are collecting the data fresh from the universe or from the public, so whatever data we have collected, so it will have to be measured and it will have to be scaled. So, that is what we have this in this, that is what we will be learning in this Unit 3, that is measurement and scaling. The next one is the sampling. Now, what is this sampling? What are the various methods of sampling and how do we do sampling? All this we'll be learning in Unit 4. Then last one will be the methods of analysis. Now, what is this method of analysis? In Unit 5, we will be studying about the various types of analyzing the data, whatever we have collected. So, in the primary data, we will be just collecting the data from the public. So whatever data we have collected, we will be whatever the results are there, so we will be making use of the statistical tools, and there are various other tools also through which we will be able to measure the data, and then we come to a conclusion. So whatever methods we do or whatever methods we follow, all that will be there, and then we come to a conclusion, so that we will be studying in unit 5. Now we have totally 5 units in this subject, that is business research methods. Now let us see what the first learning outcome of this subject. Now, so in this syllabus for business research method, we have 5 units, and now let us see what are the learning outcomes. So first one is, we understand and learn the concepts of business research. Now, through this subject, we will be able to understand the concept of business research, and we also know what is business research. Then, next we'll understand the concept of business research design. So, what is business research design, and what are the various methods of business research design that we will be learning in this subject. Then we will also be learning about measurement and scaling. So how do we measure the results, and how do we rate the results which we have collected? So that will be there in scaling. And lastly, the concepts of sampling and various methods of analysis. So what are the various concepts of sampling and various methods of analysis? So that we will be learning through this subject. Now let us see what the first unit holds for us. Now the first unit relates to nature and scope of business research. So in this nature and scope of business research, what we will be actually studying. In this, the role of business research in decision making. So we all know that business involves lot of decision making. So there will be lot of alternatives before the business people, and they have to come to a decision. So this decision making becomes very, very important. So it depends. So the business or the success of a business or the failure of a business depends on the decision which the business takes. So before they take any decisions, they conduct some research. So based on the research, so they will be taking the decisions, and here we will be just studying about the role of business research in decision making. How the business research will help us in taking certain decisions. So when we are taking any decisions in business, it involves lot of money. So crores of money is being invested into the business, and one wrong decision will just result in a failure to the business, or it may pull down the business. So before taking any decisions relating to the business, it is necessary for them to just study what are the results of the business research and then take appropriate decisions. Now, here we will be studying what is the actual role of business research, how it will help us in taking decisions. Then, next one is applications of business research. So, we conduct business research, and then how do we apply it? What are the various ways we can apply this business research? Then, the research process, the steps in the research process. Now, here we will be studying about the various research processes. What are the stages in research process? That we will be having a detailed study here. Then next is the research proposal. Now, what is this research proposal? Research proposal refers to the problem before the business. Suppose the sales of a company are falling down. Now, we have to do research and see why there is a fall in the sales. So, is it because of the fall in the demand, or is it because of irregular supply, or is it because of the change in the customer's demand? Maybe due to any of these reasons. So we should try to analyze what is the exact reason for the fall in the sales of the business. Then, so that becomes the basis for research. So basically research is undertaken to find a solution to any of the problems. Then next one is problem formulation. Now, what do we mean by problem formulation? So we have heard of the saying that a problem well defined is solved. Now, what does this mean? So if you know exactly what your problem is, then you are able to find a solution. So when you just go deeper into the problem, when you just understand where the problem is, only then you will be able to find a solution. So here we will be just thinking about problem formulation. So how do you say what the problem of the business is? So how do you define the problem and then you find the solution? Then lastly, management decision problem versus business research problem. Now, what is this management decision problem? So, management decisions, the management would have taken a decision, and then we have a comparison between the management decision problem and the business research problem. So, how do you correlate both? So, what are the various comparisons between the management decision problem and the business research problem, and how do you resolve the differences and come to a conclusion? So, all this forms a part of the Unit 1 of the BRM subject. Now, next, Unit 2. Now, what does this Unit 2 comprise of? Research design. Now, what is this research design? So, in this research design, we will be studying the various types of business research. In this, we have the exploratory research. What is this exploratory research? So, you try to explore the various causes for business research. So, you are, in other words, searching for the various reasons for the problem. Then, next one is descriptive research, and the last one is the casual research. Descriptive research means you try to describe what is the actual research, and then the last one is the casual research. Then next one is validity in experimentation, internal validity and external validity. Now, you try to experiment. What is the experiment you do? You conduct a survey of people and you try to just find out the answers from the people itself, and then you try to validate what are the reasons you have given. So, what is the problem? What is the solution? All this we will be learning in this validity in experimentation. Then second one is secondary data research. Now, what is the secondary data research? So, secondary data research is that research which has been already done. So, in primary data, you will be actually going into the field and collecting all the data from the field, whereas in secondary data, you don't have to do anything. You just have to go to the government libraries or sources where you get secondary data. You just collect the data from them and make use of the data for your research purposes. So, secondary data research. Then what are the advantages and disadvantages of secondary data? So, whatever it is, whether it is a primary data or secondary data, both have their own advantages and disadvantages. Now, in the secondary data, we will be studying about what is secondary data, what are the advantages, what are the disadvantages. Now, primary data has to be collected on our own, whereas secondary data has already been collected. So, it is the researchers who would have already collected all the research material, and they would have already collected all the data relating to that particular subject, and they would have stored it in the libraries. Now, we just go to access the library and collect all the data. The criteria for evaluating secondary sources secondary sources of data in Indian context. Now, what is this criteria for collecting secondary sources? Now, in research, we have to decide whether we make use of the primary data or whether we make use of the secondary data. So, when do we use primary data? When do we use secondary data? And then we also have to note the secondary data sources in Indian context. So, in India, so what are the various secondary sources available and how do you make use of it? When do you make use of it? Why do you make use of it? So, all this you will be learning in this criteria for evaluating secondary data. Then, next one is syndicated research in India. Now, we will be studying about what is actual research which is going on in India. And lastly, the primary data collection, survey versus observation. So, what is this primary data collection? As I had already told you before, primary data is you just collect the actual data from the field. So, it is the first hand information which you are collecting from the actual source of the material. Then, in this primary data collection, we have again two methods. One is the survey method, one is the observation method. So, in the survey method, you conduct a survey. So, you just see what are the various available sources of information, and then second one is the observation method. Through the method of observation also, you can collect lot of information. So, we will be studying about the primary data collection, and in that the survey versus observation, which is better, whether you want to go in for a survey or whether you want to go in for the observation method. Now, in Unit 3, we will be having discussion on measurement and scaling. Now, what do you mean by measurement and scaling? So, when you are collecting the data, so we have to collect all the data. You have to just measure whatever is the data given. So, primary scales of measurement: nominal, ordinal, interval and ratio. So, whenever we are collecting the primary data from the field, we have to just use various scales of measurement. So, the various scales of measurement are the nominal scale, ordinal scale, interval and the ratio. So, what is nominal? What is ordinal? What is interval? Yes, interval you would have studied in business stats, the class interval. So, you know the frequency distribution table which you have studied in your lower classes. So, what are the various measures which come between a particular class interval? Suppose it is 0 to 10, 10 to 20, 20 to 30, 30 to 40, 40 to 50. Then, so what are the various frequencies between 0 to 10? Again 10 to 20. So, in this way you can have a frequency distribution table and then you just measure the data whatever is given. So, you put it through all the statistical tools and then come to a conclusion. Then scaling technique, paired comparison, rank order and constant sum. So, in this again we have various statistical tools. In paired comparison, you can make use of the Spearman's rank correlation or correlation analysis, regression analysis. So, the various methods are there and you can make use of it. Semantic differential, itemized ratings, etc. Then Likert scale, questionnaire form and design. So, when you are going in for a survey or when you want to go in for a primary collection of data, then you need to have a questionnaire. Now, when you are preparing a questionnaire, so what is the form of the questionnaire and what is the design? So, what are the important things you need to just put in the questionnaire when you collect the data? So, all this we will be learning in this questionnaire form and design. So, this relates to Unit 3 of this subject. Then, in the Unit 4, we have the sampling. Now, what do we mean by a sample or what do we mean by sampling? So, sample is a representation of the entire universe. Now, suppose you want to conduct a research on the usefulness of mobile phones in online education. So, what do? You just have to go and contact almost all the students. So, it may be the college students, or it may be the pre-university students, high school students, or the primary school students. So, there are different ways of where you will be collecting the data. Now, whenever you are collecting the data, we cannot go and ask each and every college student about the relevance of mobile phones in online education. So, what do? We have a selection of some of the colleges, and we go there and we select from each college at least 25 to 30 students. We just question them and we collect the information. So, in this way, we will be able to almost cover all the colleges in and around the city, and we can read the results of that survey. So, in this way, sample means it is a representation of the whole. Or when you are collecting the sample, if there are 100 or 200 colleges in and around the city, then you have to make a choice. Out of the 200 colleges, you may say that I will go only to 20 colleges. Now, in these 20 colleges, you see the strength of the college, and then you decide how many students you will interview. So, in this way, you try to bring in a sampling method, and through the samples, you try to come to a conclusion. Then, determination of sample size using statistical techniques. Now, how many samples you want, or how many people you want to interview. So, this you will be deciding with the help of the statistical techniques. So, there are various statistical tools with the help of which you can decide how many samples you want to just interview. Then, in the next unit and the last unit, we have the methods of analysis. Now, what is this methods of analysis? So, the analysis of variance, one way and two way. So, we have the various methods of analysis. That is, once you collect all the data, then you subject the data to various statistical tools, and then you come to a conclusion. So, analysis of variance. Now, what is this analysis of variance? You have already studied in your stats subject about the variance. So, what are the degree of variance? That is the standard deviation. It may be the measures of central tendency, the mean, median, mode. So, how far it is from the mean, how far it is from the median. So, all these measures of variance you would have studied. So, this will help us in coming to a solution to the problem. Then, we also have the chi-square test, or the goodness of fit. So, which test is good, that we have to decide. Then, multivariate data analysis, or factor analysis, principal component analysis. So, multivariate data analysis. So, in this we will be studying about the factor analysis, and lastly we will be studying about discriminant analysis. So, there are various methods of just checking about the authenticity of the data, how far the data is good, or how far you can just believe in the conclusion or to the data, or how far you can believe in the result, or how this result will help in taking business decisions. So, these are the 5 chapters which you will be studying in this business research methods. Now, next, in this college, we have 3 internal tests. Now, in the first internals, it will be usually conducted for 20 marks. So, the entire paper is for 80 marks. That is, for external, you will be writing for 80 marks, and for internals, it will be for 20 marks. Now, in internal 1, we have the first 2 chapters, that is, nature and scope of business research and research design. Now, for internal 2, we have measurement and scaling, and in internal 3, we have sampling, methods, and methods of analysis. That is, the 4th and 5th chapter we will be having for the 3rd internals. Then, maximum final marks will be awarded on the average of 3 internals. So, based on the 3 internals, we take an average of the 3 internals, and then we award the internal marks, which is usually for 20. Then, next, what will be the question paper pattern. So usually part A, it comprises of 4 questions. So 4 questions will be there. Out of that, you will have to answer only 2 questions for 15 marks each. So total marks will be 30. Then in part B, there will be 5 questions. Out of 5, you have to answer only 3 questions, and this is for 10 marks. So 10 into 3 comes up to 30. Then in part C, we have 6 questions. So out of the 6 questions, you have to answer only 4, and each carries 5 marks. So 4 into 5 is 20. So you come up to the total of 80 marks. So this 80 marks you will have to write for the external. So for 80 marks you write, and then 20 marks will be the internal. So totally the paper is for 100 marks. Then next, what are the books for reference? So Chawla D and Sondi N, Research Methodology, Concepts and Cases. First edition, Vikas Publishing House. So if you can refer this book, Research Methodology, Concepts and Cases, which the author is D. Chawla and N. Sondi. So published by the Vikas Publishing House. This is one recommended book for this subject. Then we also have Marketing Research and Applied Orientation. So this is the second book for reference. So it is written by N. Malhotra and -S. So this is the second book which is been published by the Prentice Hall of India. Then we also have this book by Business Research Methods. So 9th edition, it is written by W.G. Sigmund and B.J. Babin. So it is published by the Cengage Learning. And lastly, we have this book, Business Statistics and Decision Making with Data. So it is written by Johnson R.A. and Wickham. So and John Wiley and Sons. So these are the 4 books for reference. So for more information, you can always refer these books. Then we also have the chapter-wise allotment of marks. Now in this, the unit 1, it will carry 25 marks. So you can expect one 15-mark question and one 10-mark question from unit 1. In unit 2, you can expect one question each for 15 marks, 10 marks and 5 marks. In unit 3, very important chapter, you will be getting 2 15 marks questions, one 10-mark question and one 5-mark question. Unit 4, it carries 10 marks only, and unit 5, so you can expect one 10-mark question and 3 5-marks questions. So totally, if you can go through this weightage of marks, you can see which chapter is very, very important. If you can see, unit 3 is more important as it carries almost 45 marks, and then all other units are not so very important. But then you should always know that it is essential for you to study all the units. Then next, the most expected questions. So in part A, so what are the most expected questions here? Steps involved in business research process. Now here they will be usually asking the question based on the business research process. Now what is the actual process of research? First one is problem identification, then decide to take up the research, then we decide about what is the kind of research, we decide about the research design, and then we decide about the methods of data collection, whether we go in for the primary data or for the secondary data. Then if it is a primary data, then where should we go and collect the information? Or if it is secondary data, then what are the various sources of information available? Then you just go into the process. So that will be the steps involved in business research process. Then second one is sources of primary data collection. So in this primary data collection, we will be actually collecting the first hand information from the field itself, the actual universe. So what are the various sources of primary data collection? Whom should you contact in order to collect the primary data? So that is what we mean by sources of primary data collection. So you have to make an identification. So from whom you have to go and collect the data. Then meaning and methods of scaling techniques. So what is the meaning of scaling technique and what are the methods of scaling technique? Now what is this scaling technique? So in other words, if the things can be measured in quantitative terms, then it is fine. But there are certain aspects of survey we cannot measure it in quantitative terms. For example, the rose is a beautiful flower, but then can you measure the beauty of the rose in quantitative terms? No, we cannot. Then how do you just measure the qualities of a person, how good a person is, or how intelligent he is, how emotional he is? So all these measures, it can be done only with the help of the scaling method. Now what is the scaling? You just rate the goodness of a person between 1 to 10. So how good is? If he is a very good person, you can give him a 9 out of 10. But then if he is not so good, then you can say that his goodness is between 5 to 6, means he is a person who is not very particular about ethics and morality, etc. Then, so in this way, so we can just through the scaling method, we can just measure those aspects of qualities which we cannot otherwise measure. Then steps involved in designing a questionnaire. Now when it is very important, when you collect the primary data or when you have a primary survey of information, then the questionnaire becomes the most important. So the questionnaire should not be very long nor should be very short. Suppose the questions are very boring, then the person who is answering the question, he may lose interest in answering. Then how you should design the questionnaire so that it is interesting both for the questions, for the person who is answering the question, he should not get bored. It should not be too long, it should not be too short, and it should not. So you should try to see that you collect the maximum information from the person without boring the person. Then next is in part B, the role of business research in decision making process. Now what is the role of business research in decision making process? So you have to just see the importance of business research, then various sources of secondary data. So if you go in for secondary data, then what are the various methods of secondary data, or what are the various sources available before you, that we have to write for this question. Then factors influencing the sample size. Now what do we mean by sample size? So in this sample size, you will be determining what is the actual number of people you will be interviewing or people you will be questioning. So how do you decide what is the ample sample size? Suppose the universe is around 1 lakh, or you have to just collect information from 1 lakh people. Then what will be the actual sample size? Whether 10,000 is good or whether 40,000 is good, whether 25,000 is good. So depending on the nature of the problem, you decide what is the sample size. Then the difference between questionnaire and observation. Now what do we mean by questionnaire and what do we mean by observation? So in this questionnaire method, so we will be asking questions from the respondents and collecting the information. We collect the opinion, we collect the views, we collect the answers through the help of the questionnaire. And then, but in case of observation, we don't ask any questions at all. We just keep on observing the sample and then we come to a conclusion. So what are the differences between these two methods of primary data collection that we have to write here? Then next one is the steps in data processing. So what are the various steps involved in data processing that we will be studying here? And that you will have to answer for this question. Now, coming to part C, we have a note on the chi-square test. Now, this is one of the most important tests. So, based on the hypothesis, you make use of the chi-square test. Then, a note on the analysis of variance, that is ANOVA. So, what is ANOVA? When it is used, how it is helpful in business research, that we have to write here. Then we have the Likert scale. So, then we have the time series analysis. Now, what is this time series analysis? You would have studied in your stats class. Now, you collect information relating to the past 10 years about the business and you just see how the business has been progressing. Then we just put it to all the statistical techniques and come to a conclusion. So, based on the past records, we predict the future. So, in the past 10 years, the business has been improving every year by 10%. So, when you have to forecast for the next 10 years, so what will be your forecast? So, it will always be based on the results of the past 10 years. Then we have the cluster analysis. Now, in this cluster analysis, we will be analyzing about the various cluster samples, or how do you analyze the cluster, and lastly the survey. So, survey method is one of the most important methods, or it is a very elaborate and a time consuming process. So, usually the government will undertake this survey method when it carries out a census. Now, what is census? Census is nothing but collecting the information of the public. So, whenever the government undertakes this census, so it will be conducting a survey. So, door-to-door survey of the people residing in a particular area. So, they will be collecting all the information relating to the people there, whether it is the marital status, whether it is the number of children they have and what the children are doing, what is the occupation of the people, what is the income, whether they own a two-wheeler or a four-wheeler, etc. So, all the information relating to the people will be collected in a census survey. So, you have to answer these questions in part C. With this, we come to the end of this session. Hope you have all followed it. Thank you.